It all started with a sharp pain in my chest, a searing, unbearable sensation that spread through my body like wildfire. My vision blurred, my limbs grew heavy, and within seconds, darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke up, I was surrounded by complete silence. My body was stiff, my head pounded, and a crushing weight pressed down on my chest. I tried to move, but something was terribly wrong. My fingers scraped against rough fabric. The air was thick, stale, and suffocating. Panic set in. I forced my fingers to move, reaching out in every direction. My hands hit wood. It was close. Too close. I couldn't stretch my arms fully. I lifted them above me and met resistance almost immediately. That's when the realization hit me. I was in a coffin. The weight on my chest wasn't just a feeling. It was real. Tons of soil pressing down on me, burying me alive. I tried to scream, but my throat was dry, my voice barely a whisper. My breaths came in ragged gasps as the confined space sucked the oxygen from my lungs. My heart pounded, the terror consuming every rational thought I had left. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare. But it wasn't. I was dead. At least that's what they thought. Time passed. Minutes. Hours. I didn't know. My body trembled as I tried to remember what had happened before I woke up in this nightmare. A heart attack. That's what the doctor said. My family found me unresponsive, no pulse, no breath. I was declared dead on the scene, but I wasn't dead. I was still here, trapped in a wooden box, 6 feet under. I thought about my funeral. Did they cry? Did they say kind words? I pictured my mother, her tears staining the black lace of her dress. My father, stone-faced, unwilling to show weakness. Friends, distant relatives, all gathered around my grave, believing they had laid me to rest. If only they knew. As I struggled, my fingernails clawed at the wood, splinters digging into my skin. The sound of my own desperate scratching was deafening in the silence. The air was getting thinner. My body was screaming for oxygen, for relief, for escape. And then, something moved. At first, I thought it was my imagination. But no, I felt it. A slight shift, a vibration beneath me. And then another. Something was crawling in the soil above me. The thought made my skin crawl. Was it bugs? Worms? Something worse? The dirt shifted again, this time more aggressively, as if something was trying to reach me. I held my breath, my entire body frozen. And then I heard it. A whisper. It was faint, but unmistakable. A voice, low and raspy, drifting through the wooden coffin. You're not alone. My blood ran cold. I pressed my ear against the coffin lid, hoping, praying, that I had imagined it. But no. The whisper came again, this time closer. They buried me too. A chill shot through my spine. I slammed my hands against the lid, desperate to get out, to wake up, to escape this nightmare. But then, something scratched back. Not from inside the coffin, from the outside. Something, or someone, was out there. And it was digging. A new wave of panic crashed over me. Was it a rescuer? A person who heard my screams? Or was it something else? The scratching grew louder, more frantic, more desperate. And then, the coffin lid creaked. It was opening. The air rushed in, fresh but cold, carrying the unmistakable stench of decay. My lungs ached as they filled with the sudden burst of oxygen, but I barely had time to register it before I saw something move in the darkness above me. Fingers, pale, skeletal fingers reaching down into my coffin. I screamed, thrashing against the wood, trying to push the lid closed, but the hands grabbed me, strong, cold, unrelenting. They pulled me up. and for a moment, I thought I was saved, until I saw the face staring back at me. It was not human. Its eyes were hollow sockets, its skin stretched too tight over its bones. A mouth hung open, whispering in a language I didn't understand. And then I saw them. Dozens of figures, standing around the grave, watching, waiting. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. The last thing I felt was the cold embrace of those lifeless hands pulling me into the darkness once more. This time there was no escape. But I woke up again. Not in the coffin. Not in the grave. Somewhere else. My body ached. My skin felt raw, and my lungs burned with every breath I took. I was lying on something cold and metallic. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled my nostrils. Overhead, fluorescent lights flickered. A morgue. I was in the morgue. My breath came in short gasps as my mind reeled, trying to make sense of what was happening. I wasn't dead, but I had been buried. I had felt the dirt, the wood, the fear, and yet, I was here. Footsteps echoed in the distance. I forced my head to turn, my body barely responding to my commands. A figure stood at the far end of the room, dressed in a white coat, his face obscured by shadows. Then he spoke. "You weren't supposed to wake up." The room grew colder. My body refused to move. The man stepped closer, and for the first time I saw his face. It was the same hollow-eyed figure that had pulled me from the coffin. Only now it smiled. Then I realized I wasn't truly alive. The cold seeped into my bones. I lifted my hand, but my skin was pale, lifeless. The truth settled in like a stone in my gut. I had been pulled from one nightmare into another, a fate worse than death itself.